Hey, welcome everybody. This is Kalyan here from NASSCOM, and we are in conversation with HSBC. And today we are speaking to Vikram, who leads, who's the head of IT, MSS IT for the HSBC Technology Services team in India. And our topic of discussion today is OKR techniques for IT transformation. And that's why we'll take a couple of minutes to just lay the context here. With the hybrid model, work model kicking in, let's say the pandemic, employee engagement has definitely become a very key topic for each and every organization, including the engineering ones. And that's where a shared sense of purpose, a clear accountability and metrics around that is something, that has definitely caught the attention of the entire ecosystem. And that's where we're trying to probably get into a conversation with Vikram to understand more about how it has worked out at his end. So Vikram, to start the conversation, wanted to kick it off with maybe some thoughts about how your organization has achieved increased cadence, increased release cadences, increased production releases in such a challenging environment. Right? Can you just take us through some of those thoughts on how it all happened, and then maybe we can dive a little deeper?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Kalyan, for having me here. It's a great pleasure actually to be part of this forum. So you spoke about and you asked about this. How did we go about this journey of increasing the production releases or release cadence, as we say, right? And I think before I could answer that, let me rewind a bit and give you some of history in terms of what made us think to embark on this journey, right? So 7 years ago, if I remember correctly, we in IT, we were looking at how do we fundamentally transform us in terms of how we deliver software. And if you read a lot of literature, it is fairly evident that high performing IT team is a competitive advantage. I mean, the companies which have high profitability, increased market share, they tend to have high performing IT teams, right? So it's the right thing to do. And a lot of literature that you read about what is a high performing IT team, how do you measure that? Couple of things stand out. So one is what we call as stability, right? How stable and how resilient your environment is and the IT environment that you are supporting. And second thing, someone may call throughput, someone may call speed. So speed at which you're delivering, right? So kind of speed, throughput, and your stability stands out. So when we were looking to define what do we want to do and how do we transform, we really like this idea that throughput and the stability are good parameters for us to actually build on. And when we looked at our own department, how we deliver software, we could clearly relate, because speed is something that we can demonstrate to number of releases that we make into production, and stability is something we can demonstrate and measure by looking at how stable the production environment is in terms of incidences and events, right? So that was a great, and that was the kind of initial thinking, right? Release cadence and incident are the good parameters for us to go after. But that was just job half done. When we thought of doing some sort of a communication campaign around that, we were very clear that it has to be easily understood by teams, right? Because intuitively you would think faster you go, the greater the chances of breaking something into production. So intuitively it sounds not correct, right? But we did kind of elaborate that why we think, let's say, more releases is actually a better parameter, because if you release faster, that means you will have to break down your releases into small chunks, which means, for example, if it's a small release, then the reviews are effective. If it's a small release, then anything going wrong in production is less likely to happen. And even if it happens, the chances of rollback will be in record time, right? So there is a lot of things that actually are supporting release cadence. And incident management, again, it's simple to understand, right? So we then came up with a communication campaign which was catchy, and yet it is something that we thought people will understand. We call it double half quarter. So double your releases, half your high and critical incidences, and reduce by a quarter your low and medium incidences, right? So that's how we started that journey. And the reason we call it as an OKR technique, because that was our objective. Objective was to make sure that we transform the way we actually deliver software by doing what? By doing the result areas where there's by doubling our release cadence, by halving our critical and high incidences, and reducing by quarter our slow and medium. So that was a genesis, and I'm happy to say that it's been a 6-7 years now. When we look back, and I look at 2014 graph, the amount of changes we were doing in an entire year in 2014, we pretty much have done the same amount of changes in a month last year, right? So that's a
Vikram,
phenomenal
that is
transformation.
absolutely great to hear, Vikram. And I see a lot of passion in what you're saying, right? That's where I think, from an audience standpoint, I think it's also good to understand what has been your personal journey like. I'm sure you must have gone through a lot of thought process yourself. How did you get on board? How did that work out? Please take us through some of that, if you can.
Absolutely. So Kalyan, you asked a very good question, right? Because when I look back my personal journey, I must admit that I was a bit skeptic at the beginning, right? Because as I said, speed and stability, if you go after both the parameters, it sounds counterintuitive. So I was a skeptic. But then when the communication was launched, and I think there was a lot of effort went into communicating effectively, few things came out very clear, right? So I realized that I think when we say double off quarter, these are not absolute goals, right? These are relative goals to your own pod. So for example, if at that point in time, actually, I was running a pod which was maintaining a legacy platform. And if we were releasing once a quarter, right? Big, large release once a quarter. So we realized for us, it means maybe we need to release, if we are releasing 4 releases in a year, we have to just release 8 releases in a year, right? So that's all meant to us. So once we realize it's not a competition, it's a relative target, I think then thinking become easier. The second thing I realized that these OKRs, the way they were defined, they were shared goals. So they were not like a goal for a particular pod, they were shared for all IT teams. So that actually made a lot of difference. The other thing, again, I realized that these goals were deliberately not prescriptive. So they were setting an ambitious agenda, but they were not telling us how to go about it, right? So we realize, and my own personal journey tells me that I think if we empower people, if we trust people, and if we give them ambitious goal, teams are extremely smart. They will figure out a way, and they will understand these things cannot happen the way we are doing. And the reason we chose OKR and not like your year-end objectives is because some of these things, and you can imagine if you're maintaining a legacy platform, transformation doesn't happen overnight. You will need to invest, right? So some of these goals needed to have a kind of a multi-year horizon. So my journey, as I said, to sum it up, initially I was a bit of a skeptic, but now, as you can see, I'm a hardcore convert into this philosophy.
That's absolutely good to hear. And that brings me to the next question, right? Which is a segue to my next question. As you mentioned, transformation doesn't happen in isolation, right? It's often achieved only when you get people along, all the stakeholders on the same page. That's where my next question to you would be, you had different facets of stakeholders, right? Developers on one end, you had the management on the other, or let's say the people on the other end, the finance guys and whoever they are. And how did you really go about the change management perspective, right? Of course, when you look at an organization your size, when you look at a team your size and distributed, across the geography, working remotely or in a hybrid mode, right? I think that brings in a lot of cultural challenges and otherwise. But how did we really go about the change management? Was there something specific that you did that we can learn from? Is something that we'd like to understand from your end?
Yeah, Kalyan, you said something, and that sums up, right? It's a cultural change, right? This sounds like we are actually changing how we deliver software, but fundamentally this is a cultural change, mindset change, right? So yes, you're right. Our key stakeholders were our developers. I think they had to buy into this, and obviously our internal business stakeholder, right? Because the ones who are receiving the software that we are developing. One of the fundamental things we realized at the very early stage was communication is key. And that's why I said the reason we came up with a catchy phrase like double half quarter DHQ was A, it was catchy, B, it was easy to understand. So we spent a lot of time actually in communicating effectively, right? We held a lot of workshops, we held a lot of town halls, we had a lot of drop-in sessions where we kind of address people's queries, questions, and concerns. That was very, very important. The second thing is these things you need to have a joined up organization. So from management to the developer, I think the mindset has to be if we have to achieve this goal, we need to really go after any blockers that are going to stop us or that are going to slow us down, right? So if it's a management will remove the blockers. If it's a developers, if they have blockers, we will bring in tools to help them remove those blockers, right? So it's like there was this kind of joined up effort from top to down, from management to developer. We also took a lot of help from what the industry agile coaches or SMEs who are in agile coaches, right? Because a big part of cultural change is to get practitioner, sit with the team and help them understand this philosophy, right? It's one thing for me to come on stage and say, let's double our releases, but it's a different thing when pods need to actually figure out the way, right? And we realized that having a specialist agile coaches at the beginning of the journey actually helped us a lot, because they were helping pods to find answer themselves, right? They were just trying to declutter their
Right.
minds. So that was another key thing. And from a business point of view, we were again championing big time the whole product ownership model, right? Where the product owners own the platform and they work in unison with IT teams, rather than having a transactionary approach where we deliver software, they sign off, and then they give us a feedback. Instead of that, the model is we work as one team. The product owners and the IT team sit together, they plan. It's still work in progress in many ways, Kalyan, right? I mean, while I've spoken about a lot, these things, there is nothing called as done, right? You never are done with this kind of journeys, right? This is an ambitious journey we are in. And you also touched upon the whole pandemic and how we are adapting to hybrid model. As teams evolve, as there are new faces joining teams, it's a constant effort to re-emphasize this message, right? We have to constantly
Right.
re-emphasize. We cannot sit and say, okay, now it's done, right? So that's I would say change management, those are the key aspects, but a lot of that we still need to continue so that we don't lose momentum.
Sure, sure. On the agile coaches front, just wanted to understand a little better. So, do you now have a panel of them who are working with you to constantly work on this journey? And as a new team comes in, are you trying to again get them up and running? What's your philosophy around the whole
So
ongoing transformation, right?
so initially we had a big push of agile coaches across regions and in our pods also, right? So we were very, very conscious that initially the messaging has to be correct. But as teams became mature, I think a lot of that model was also train the trainer. So sometimes their internal staff picked up that mantle and role, right? And we do still every now and then go after and take help from agile coaches wherever teams need it. But I think the initial demand that we saw 5-6 years ago, it is not there. But at the same time, there are a lot of practitioners in-house who are playing that role.
This is absolutely great to hear. What you're essentially saying is throughout this journey, you have now built internal capacity within the teams who are further
Yeah,
now training the newer teams who are coming in, or newer people who are taking on the roles, and thereby you're sustaining this entire transformation
absolutely.
journey, right? And
Absolutely.
as you continue transforming. And that's where my next real question would be, today, the OKR techniques have been employed at scale in larger organizations. There are newer startups, newer unicorns who are applying it. But if one were to look at an organization your size or similar to yours, right? What would your 2 or 3 advice look like, right? What would your advice look like in terms of specific things that they should be doing in order to make it more effective?
Yeah. So if you see what we have learned in this journey, right? One of the things we have learned is going after what we called as speed or throughput and the stability or resilience is actually right attributes for us to go after. So that's been our learning. Those are the right attributes, because one of the mistakes we may make is sometimes we may go on attributes we actually do not have the same impact. So selecting the right goals or right OKR is the first step, right? And I think throughput and stability is by far universal. I think those are the ones which I would definitely recommend. Communication absolutely is key, because these things, if not done correctly and not communicate correctly, can have a counter effect on the organization, because you have a number of applications, especially in banks like ours, right from state of the art to your core platforms running on some of the legacy platform.
Right.
So your messaging is key, that these are relative goals, not absolute goals. So that's another thing. I would also say the important way to attack this is it's a cultural problem and cultural change that is required. So we need to attack it from that end, right? That the entire organization has to be joined up from top to bottom. You can't expect a pod sitting in a corner to actually transform itself, right? The entire organization needs to get behind that. So that would be my third recommendation. And last one is, and again, something that we've learned from our journey is start something small, do a pilot, iterate over, learn from it, and then scale. Rather than doing a big bang, because in these things there are a lot of learnings that you get through iterative process, right? So this is never done, as I mentioned earlier. So I would give those 4 things for teams like ours to actually look into it if they are looking to transform themselves.
No, that's absolutely great to hear, Vikram, and that brings us to the end of this conversation. Thanks a lot for your time. And I believe, this conversation should be helpful to any team that is looking to maybe embark on a transformation, or even if they're within the journey, to introspect and to look back, to reflect and see, what are things that they could change, and maybe, reach out to you for best practices at some point of time, right? So thanks a lot, and have a good day.
Thank you, Kalyan. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you.